Well, Cleve, good to see you. We were just over at the Fox West Theater. We announced the state from Colorado Creative Industries is investing in the Fox West Theater restoration, another $3.4 million. We're very excited about that news for Southern Colorado. And I'm excited to join you with Team Colorado, because that's what it's all about. I know you're talking about the team today, and boy, it's been a tough year for all the teams, hasn't it? But I think we're building back strong. I visited a number of small businesses across Pueblo County and Trinidad, and I was up in El Paso County earlier. Really just seeing having very strong years. In fact, the biggest thing we're hearing from so many local businesses, and I'm sure that you all do too, is that their biggest challenge is hiring enough people to do the work. That's a good challenge to have. It's certainly a better challenge than not having enough customers. And in fact, in the hardest times for Colorado and the nation, and most recently the Great Recession of 08, 09, it wasn't too long ago when there was a job posting, there were a lot of people lined up to get that job because there weren't enough jobs to go around. Now they have the job posting and they're lucky to get enough applicants to fill it, but that means if you're looking for work, it's a good time. And in fact, there's upward pressure on wages. Again, challenging for some businesses, but great for folks who are looking for a job and looking to earn a living and get to work. It's a great time to be able to earn a little bit more and to pick up extra hours if you want, to work overtime, work 2 shifts. People have all sorts of opportunities that were hard to come by, especially in many areas of Southern Colorado not that long ago. And there's areas where that's still the case. Look, we have a good story to tell about Colorado's economic recovery. And we've done a lot of bipartisan work in the legislature with the state stimulus, provided tax relief for our small businesses across the entire state, our restaurants, bars. They were able to keep the sales tax they collected for 3 months rather than pay it to the state, so effectively allowing them to pay their employees, pay their rent. They were able to keep that about 2.9% for the last 3 months over most of summer. We did it also last year, waived liquor license fees for a year. We're trying to find what other state fees we can either reduce or eliminate, have a holiday for a year. Certainly trying to save our small businesses, our individuals, money, really every way we can. With the bipartisan infrastructure package, and I want to thank Action 22 for the support of that. We got it done. A part of that was actually reducing everybody's vehicle registration fees. So on every car, they go down $11 this year, so everybody, and next year as well. So a cut to people's vehicle registration fees was part of that. But along with it, over the next decade, the investment we need in rural Colorado, in our whole state, because we're all interconnected when it comes down to it, to really make sure that we have good roads, good bridges, invest in reducing traffic with lanes where we need it. Also very forward-looking in terms of how can we also embrace transit, make sure we have the electric vehicle charging infrastructure as more and more people buy electric vehicles. Last quarter, 6% of the vehicles sold in Colorado were electric. So that's already here. That's no longer a rounding error. Part of what that transportation package was about is to make sure that as there's more and more people driving EVs, which is great, that they also are in some way paying for the roads, because the whole way it was set up decades ago is the gas tax paid for the roads. But as vehicles become more fuel efficient, which is great, and as people switch to EVs, which is great for those who want to do it, that formula no longer works because they're still driving on the roads, but they're not paying in the same way. So that's why we are where we are until we got it fixed. And thank you, and most of your counties endorsed that, and it was really great working with a broad coalition and the business community, rural Colorado, to get that done. In many ways, in the transportation game, rural Colorado has the most at stake in a statewide solution. Because if we didn't have a statewide solution, you will always have your big population centers, Denver, El Paso County, Larimer, Boulder County. Their voters will fund their own roads, and they do, and they have, even in El Paso County, right, where they went to the ballot and they funded their roads. But for areas that don't have the tax base, and who have an extra value on the interconnectivity. We've just got to have that state solution. So we did that. It's rolling out. You're going to see improvements in your area. There's a 40% share right to local, right to counties. This is money that kicks in over the next few years, but it's on a very good trajectory over the next 10 years. And I'm very excited that we got that done for Team Colorado. The other area that we're working on a lot is early childhood education. Probably something you hear in your communities too. When you talk about a workforce and how people can afford to live in our communities with the rising cost of living, along with rent or home prices, childcare is one of those things that families say, well, how can I afford to work if I barely make enough to pay for the childcare? So the voters approved the preschool initiative we had last year. So universal preschool will roll out 2023. It'll be funded locally. We're working with local early childhood councils, mixed delivery, meaning it'll be both private providers and the school district. We're also, for many rural communities, want to get more providers into town because it's really about also getting the providers there. And sometimes that funded preschool can be that linchpin that they can then build the 0 to 3 service off of knowing that they have that funded preschool. So we're really excited about the rollout of that. The funding kicks in for 23 for the universal preschool. So it's a year of planning and working with the local governments to get that done. It's an exciting opportunity for the state. Like your counties, like your cities, the state also has one-time recovery funds, American Rescue Act. We have some one-time funds that, like you, we have to invest over the next 2 years. And the state, working with our legislature, we've identified a few key areas for that investment. I also want to make sure we point out we've worked closely with our great treasurer, Dave Young is here. I think you'll be hearing from him tomorrow. Thank you, Dave. Dave joined us along with Republicans and Democrats from the state legislature in a statewide listening tour. We did it virtually, and it was great. We had great participation from southern Colorado, from really across the entire state. But, almost everywhere, some of the issues that rose to the top were housing costs and behavioral health. And so those are two issues that we have bipartisan task force at the legislature working on how the state can invest $500 million in housing, $500 million in behavioral health, but also leverage that with your local investment. It's not just about the state building $500 million of housing. In the housing world, that's actually not very much. It's about how do we use that to unlock several $1 billion of housing, working with cities, working with counties, working with developers, working with nonprofits, really the full continuum to leverage that investment to create more housing opportunities that people can afford. I don't, it's confusing when we use the word affordable housing because people think it's just the capital A affordable housing. It's broader than that. It's middle class housing. The capital A affordable housing is some of it. It's workforce housing in some areas of our state, ag areas, ski areas, workforce housing. So there's different kinds of needs in different areas. And the state wants to make sure that we're flexible enough to partner and leverage that $500 million into, again, probably not enough to address the whole thing, but really making a dent in making sure that our communities can thrive with housing that people can afford. Behavioral health, really tackling a lot of the issues we have around substance abuse, around dependency, around depression, and making sure that we can update that system and streamline that system to make it more effective, including more treatment facilities for substance abuse, more beds, more outpatient opportunities to help people recover and really regain their dignity and their lives. That also ties into the homelessness issue, the crime issue. They're all interrelated in many ways, and how we as a state can rise to the occasion and tackle that. So those are some of the things that we're excited to work on. Also, investments in ag. We made sure that ag was really one of the central priorities for the Rescue Act funds, in addition to the kind of marquee central investments like the state fairgrounds, the Denver Stock Show. We also are getting the money out. So we've created at the Colorado Department of Ag soil health money, agrivoltaic money, and now working on how we administer about a $30 million loan and grant fund to help build ag infrastructure back, because we saw some of the supply chain issues that we experienced in the pandemic and even now, and how can we leverage kind of state investment to have more processing capacity to make sure that we are not as dependent on international supply chains and can support our farmers and ranchers even in difficult times. So those are some of the things we're working on. I would love to hear some of the things that are on your minds and any questions or comments that you have. Yes.
Would you care to comment on this legislative session and the bill that passed affecting how us as farmers and ranchers now have to compensate our employees who for decades and decades were exempt for what I feel were very justified reasons? And just personally, between you and me, when we participated in those conversations, there was some really nasty language that passed around accusing us of being racists and really poor employers from the advocates of that type of legislation, which I don't think many of us in this room who are in agriculture appreciated that. So that was more of a personal comment, but that legislation is signed and working on it. I'd like to hear your comments.
Yeah, well, and I obviously I would say it's completely inappropriate, and I would condemn anybody that would use that kind of language. I don't know, who said that, but people get, heated in these things, and hopefully it wasn't members of our legislature or anything like that, but I don't know who it was. We are glad that we got the rulemaking authority that we wanted, because they wanted to lock some stuff into law, like 40-hour work weeks and things like that, which we did not support. We got the flexibility. We now have that rulemaking process. You might have seen the draft rules. We're trying to balance the interests, because we do want to quiet down the issue. We want to address it, so it's not something that is coming back with trying to put these things in law, and it's now open for comment. I think they came down at 56 hours a week, which was a good tie-in for our state, because that's what we do with the resort workers, and so we're able to say, look, we're not treating totally different kinds of, with the seasonal work, we're saying, 56 hours. I don't think anybody had a problem with the applying minimum wage thing. I mean, nobody could get anybody to work for below minimum. I mean, minimum wage, right? Yeah. I mean, no, that was fine, right? I mean, nobody would work for less than that anyway with that kind of work. So it's really about figuring out the hours and the overtime. We're doing our best. We have a great Department of Labor. I have confidence. Joe Barella, Kate Greenberg, our ag commissioner, they have had good listening sessions across the state, including in southern Colorado. We want to, I think, dissipate the issues, the word I was looking for. We hope that with the rulemaking that we're doing, we can listen to folks, and that this will not be something that folks are trying to do something different on and come back in years to come. Right. So I mean, that's why we want to address it here. I mean, we hope so too. It's also we're phasing it in. It's not 56 hours works for most, but some it takes some adjustment to get there, and we totally get that. And the last thing we would want to do is we want to make sure we support Colorado producers in this process. So that's underway. We hope we can dissipate it. That's kind of our we want to do what we need to do there, and it'll never be enough for some. There'll always be some that think it's too far, but we're trying to get it right.
A couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting with Dr. Jared Polis.
Yes.
The issue of rural Colorado. So a massive exodus of public health employees with the 100% vaccine mandate. He mentioned to us that he was going to be working with your office to lower the threshold so we can get those people back to work. My comment to Dr. France was, these people were the heroes back when we were into the pandemic, and now we're actually condemning them. So what is your comment? Are you working on lowering the thresholds?
Well, yeah, first of all, no one's, condemning anybody, and healthcare workers are way ahead of the general population getting vaccinated, because they see it every day. So nurses, doctors, they're 80, 90%, doctors 96%, nurses I think 82%. So they're getting vaccinated at rates, far. And one of the biggest things we hear from nurses across the strait is, why are you forcing me to work with somebody who's not vaccinated? Because they all have one. There'll be like 20 of them that are vaccinated and one that's not, and the other 19 nurses don't want to have shifts with unvaccinated person, and it's becoming a big challenge. What the challenge that we have in this is that President Biden announced, and we're expecting that there is a mandate for healthcare workers for any facility that gets Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, which is pretty much every healthcare facility. What we plan to do is just align with whatever they do. We don't know exactly what it'll be yet. We don't know if it'll be 90%, if it'll be 100%, if it exempts people who've been infected because they have some immunity who haven't got vaccinated. But unless they do something, totally out of left field. But if they do anything within that realm of like, okay, they're, exempting or not exempting people who've had it, or 90%, or we want to make sure they have a religious exemption, of course, we will just align with that, because in practice, that's what the payer is demanding. The biggest payer is saying, this is what you have to do. We're not going to be in a different place as a state. But there's just this matter of a few weeks, because we don't know exactly what CMS and what the feds are doing on that. But it'll probably be pretty close to what we have now. And obviously the message that we want to get out is, of course, folks should get vaccinated. I mean, the science is overwhelmingly clear. It's not even some like close call thing. It's like thousands of times risk reduction, if you're vaccinated. So, we just want to get the word out. And we have heard a lot of relief again from a lot of the healthcare workers in rural areas who were concerned that they were being exposed to it at work, because the vaccine, as you know, is not 100% effective, right? It's 90% effective. Great for a vaccine, but there's still risk in working around people with COVID if you, even if you've been vaccinated. Mayor?
Can you give us thoughts on this Proposition 119? Because this causes us some concern.
Yeah. Let's get a hand to our host, Mayor Phil Rico. Thank you for hosting us here today in your beautiful town. I'm voting for it. I'm also concerned about marijuana tax getting too high, but this one, I think it tops out at like 4 or 5%. What they really need to do on the tax front of marijuana, because I am concerned about where the taxes would be. But the biggest issue is, it's a little obscure, but I'm sure the mayor knows it and those involved. 280E, the federal tax law. So they need to allow for deduction of business expenses, because effectively right now, dispensaries are paying a tax on their gross rather than their net. So they're often paying a 60, 70% tax, way too high. When they fix that, this little thing we're doing is a rounding error, and we should. And I think many states are going to go a little higher on excise tax if they pull down their federal tax to a reasonable rate. So I wish it was after that. I mean, I wish that they would fix that, which I think they will, and then we did this. But, not my choice. The people put this on the ballot. What it does fund is a good thing. It's after-school programs. And so there's a gap for kids and parents who, of course, can afford it. We can get our kids after-school programs, but what about all the families who can't? And so on balance, I think it's a good thing, but I definitely get the argument against it too, and I kind of wish it was phased in a couple years later. Yeah.
We just had a very good demonstration of the shortage of water and what we're going through with the Golf District and the fine job. Now we're hearing that there's going to be revisitation of the NEPA rulemaking. Could you comment on that and what have you take us as agriculture producers?
On the federal side, I just don't know. I mean, it's not, you're saying you've heard that the feds might change NEPA rulemaking. I would have been able to answer that better when I was in Congress. I'm really focused on the state side, and I know through CDPHE on the state side, we're focused on obviously delivering on the state water plan and funding that, and we use every step of the way, in addition to the gaming funds that voters approved, modest, but tens of millions a year. We're also investing some of the Rescue Act funds in water infrastructure. I just haven't had any conversations, but I'm happy to see what our National Governors Association, NGA, is hearing on that. They haven't told us anything along those lines that we know of.
Governor, I'm really happy you came to House District 64. And you're down in southern Colorado. Los Alamos County is the largest county in my district, and they have a lot of concerns. One of the things that I'd like to talk a little bit about is something that we desperately need help on in rural Colorado is the rural-urban divide. And it's not closing, Governor. It's getting wider. I think a lot of it are unintended consequences of policy and decisions and things that are happening. So how do we work together so Colorado closes that gap? And people like me, and others in our industry, feel like we're not under attack anymore. We're not going to be targeted with labor policy or other types of activist policies or activities that are really going to hurt the things that we do to survive and thrive in rural Colorado.
Well, as you know, I'm not a believer that in that divide. I believe in Team Colorado. I think that what unites us is a lot more powerful than what divides us. That's not just geographic. That's whatever your political philosophy, whatever your race. But yes, wherever you live in our great state, what unites us as Coloradans on Team Colorado is really a lot more than whatever disagreements we might have, which should be settled civilly and discussed with one another. And there's always going to be regional differences in our state. In western Colorado, they don't want any water diverted to the Front Range, and the fast-growing suburbs, they might not have the same concern for buy and dry policies in ag that you might have in some of your counties. Elected officials in those areas are generally representing what their constituents want, and they just have different perspectives on it. But what's important, to keep in mind is that we're all on the same team here. And fundamentally, we need a state that can do and will do, and we will, all of the above. Our suburbs are likely to continue to grow. We are going to make darn sure we don't have buy and dry policies that interfere with the future of ag in eastern or western Colorado. We're going to make sure that farmers or ranchers can thrive, and of course, that the people that work on those farm and ranches get treated well and want to come back year after year if they're coming in, or if they live in the area, continue their work. And there's often great loyalty. I've met with a lot of farm workers that have been working 20, 25 years, and even second generation, their kids and their parents had worked with the same producer, and those ties of loyalty are very deep. So I think there's a lot that unites us. I'm glad. I think the focus, Team Colorado, is, and again, there's going to be, even within your communities, elected officials in the city and the county, and they might not always agree or be on the same page of every issue, but there's a lot more that unites us as a state. Yep.
Thank you for being here today, Governor. I appreciate all the agriculture we have in our area. It's really very warming, especially out the home area and everything. But I've read a little bit about the Grow Local Colorado program, and I wondered for smaller communities like us if there was some sort of guideline or performa to make that happen in small communities around Colorado and Trinidad.
So a lot of our state stuff is the Colorado Proud. So that's anywhere in Colorado. And so that's another area the legislature supported, put more money into. We want Colorado producers to get a premium for grown in Colorado products. We also support, of course, local local consumption, and there's often great pride in that. But the bigger one is the state is Colorado Proud. I think it was $2 or $3 million. What's that? 2.5, yeah. I was pretty close. I said 2 or 3, and it was 2.5. So that we put into that. So there's really some great marketing and support that they're doing with that and at CDA, and we're really excited about that work. Of course, we're also supporters of super local, and that means whether it's farmers markets, whether it's direct to table programs. I was the Yampa Valley kind of collective over, in Steamboat. So there's a lot of great examples of that around the state. How you define it is really up to you. I mean, the state's not going to get into which local you define as what, but sort of Colorado Proud is our main focus.
We have time for one more.
Yes.
I live in Wisconsin, and I'm a very proud president of
Great.
I'm going to step out of my lane. First of all, thank you for supporting higher ed.
You're saying that in Trinidad State territory, by the way, so just be careful. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for supporting higher ed. I grew up in the Front Range. I'm a Democrat. I vote Democrat. I've lived in Lamar going on 6 years now. I agree with Representative Goldthorpe. The urban-rural divide is bigger than anyone in the Front Range realizes. And Team Colorado right now has Broncos and Raiders lined up on the field together. And until we figure out how to value and hear and listen to rural people as equals, I don't know if we're going to get there. Until you live the experience, for me at least, it wasn't real. And I was a little patronizing, and I dismissed the issues, and I didn't understand the issues. I understand this much of the issue, but I think we need to figure out how to get the team together authentically.
Yeah, you need the whole team on the field. I mean, let me be clear. You know, without rural Colorado, there is no Colorado. There is no Colorado, right? So I think that's important, and I know that that's the way that most, Front Range residents feel, city residents feel, suburb. They have a tremendous amount of respect and value for what rural Colorado is, and they know that they can't live as a community without the food that they take for granted, that they get at their grocery store, without the water on their taps, without the solar power, wind power, or coal power that powers their electricity. And it is that respect and that appreciation for what all of Colorado brings that I think is the answer to what you're perceiving as a divide, but I really perceive as just one big team. We have to all be in this together. And from rural Colorado's perspective, there's no Colorado without urban and suburban Colorado, right? Without the markets. For growing in Colorado produce, without workers, we're only Colorado because we're together here, and so that has to be the focus. And I think there needs to be great respect on all sides to say this is what it takes for our team to win. Thank you all.